We're going to start in 1973, not here. This photo was taken in St. Augustine, probably, I don't know, either 2017 maybe, um, with Jim Kleeman. Uh, just very, very fortunate to get a nice, calm day, beautiful morning, northbound train. Right, you're going to be that way. Okay, so this is a map of Florida, and I'd like to just show you where we're going to be taking a look. Um, we're going to spend some time starting towards the end of the program along the Florida East Coast, which runs up through here. And now Brightline also runs this way, all the way up to Cocoa, which I'm not sure is on this map, but certainly in this general area. And then Brightline built their own track over to Orlando. But we'll go all the way up to St. Augustine and Jacksonville. We'll also take a look at some older photos in what's known as the Bone Valley, where they mine phosphate ore and make fertilizer, and that's down in this general area. We'll follow a short line from Arcadia down to Punta Gordo and Fort Myers. We'll spend some time in this general area with the sugarcane operation. And I think that's about, oh no, and we'll also spend some time, a little bit of time up in this area with a short line, couple of short line railroads. And we'll do some commuter operations that start in West Palm Beach, Tri-Rail, and Sunrail, which runs in this area around Orlando. Okay. So here we are in 1973. My parents have just moved to a place called Tamarack, which is west of Fort Lauderdale. And I took a few hours and went down to the station in Fort Lauderdale and caught the southbound Amtrak train. And I don't know which one it was. And also in Fort Lauderdale, the same day in 1973, a southbound Seaboard freight with an RS3 on the point. At least I think it's an RS3, it might have been a 2. This area has really changed with the advent of Tri-Rail. For one thing, it's now double track. At the time, this was Seaboard Coast Line track, I believe. And this is a shot of a northbound Amtrak train, again in Fort Lauderdale, this time in 1975. And then Miami in 1975, a Seaboard Coast Line freight. And the yard switcher in Miami was a Seaboard Coast Line Jeep, again in 1975. And a train arriving, Amtrak, into Miami. Matter of fact, I think the picture before was the switcher working this train. Moving further along, 1984, we're now in the era of Amfleet and F40s. Why this train is so short, I can't tell you, but this is Lakeland, Florida. Although if I had to guess, I would say this is the Tampa section of the train, and the main train went on to Miami. And finally, a few weeks ago, in Winter Haven, Florida, the southbound Floridian with Jim Kleeman. Whoops. Okay. We're going to take a look now at the railroading in the Bone Valley. And this is based in Mulberry for CSX. And they service a line that ran down this way. And then this is IMC, which stood for International Minerals Corporation, Agrico. And I think they're out of business and been taken over. So we'll start with CSX in the Bone Valley, and then we'll go take a look at Agrico. And we'll start with this train in the Tampa area. I should say Seaboard Coast Line and then CSX. And I don't know what these locomotives are. The lettering, they were taken in Lakeland again in 1984. That looks like CSX lettering, but there was no on the engines, the numerals, but there was no markings on them. But I thought it was interesting.
U.S. Army?
I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. All I can tell you is Lakeland, Florida, and you can see there's a Seaboard Coast Line locomotive down here. Right. Now, by 1984, this could have been CSX. It certainly looks like their numbers, the yellow numbers. Okay. I think this is in Plant City. That's what my notes say. Oh no, this again is in Lakeland. And we have a Seaboard system and a Seaboard Coast Line painted locomotive, intermodal. And here we are in Plant City. Plant City was an interesting place because some of the lines crossed there, but I never got a decent shot of that. Now this picture is kind of interesting for two reasons. I think this is in Port Sutton, but I won't swear to that. Port Sutton was a place where phosphate rock and phosphate fertilizers were shipped overseas. The first thing of interest is this right here, which is a mate, M-A-T-E. It's kind of like a slug, but it has some new features to it. And MATE stood for Motor Added Tractive Effort. And here we'll see a better shot of this later. We have a BQ23 and -7, and the Q stood for quarters. And the thought was you could put enough space in the cab that the entire crew could go in the cab here, and you wouldn't need a caboose. Okay, and here we have another mate. Looks like it might be at Mulberry. Mulberry was the yard from which the CSX phosphate trains ran from and to. And here we have another train with a mate. The mates usually ran with two either U-30s or U-36s. So this was kind of unusual. And in the background, we have a phosphate plant, I think. And here's a better view of the BQ23s in that beautiful CSX second paint scheme. And this was just a place where they would store phosphate rock. So in the phosphate industry, they mined and cleaned up the rock, and they had then calcium phosphate. They treated it with sulfuric acid, got calcium sulfate, which you know is gypsum. not pure enough for wallboard. So mostly it wound up on big waste piles. The highest points in Florida are probably the calcium sulfate stacks. And they wound up with a phosphoric acid, which they would either sell as a fertilizer or make into other fertilizer products. And again, you see a phosphate plant in the background there. And the cars are cars of phosphate rock. And when I was down there in 2001, they were leasing electromotive SD70Ms. And so here we have two of the paint schemes for those locomotives. Again, another phosphate plant. Another GM Lisa. This one's probably been purchased by CSX. These are all, like I said, down in the Bone Valley. And this is the way they do their mining. This is not a tracked drag line. It actually has 4 feet, or no, I'm sorry, 2 feet, one on each side, and a central column. And when they want to move it, they put down the central column and they rotate the feet forward, pull up the central column, and move forward. It's called taking a step. And I was on a business trip down here when I took this photo, and I was with the mine manager, and he said to me, "Would you like to see it take a step?" And I said, "Yes, sir." The Bone Valley was critter land back in the 70s. And this photo was taken, I think, in 1981. And I think it's either a GE or a Plymouth, probably GE, a small one. I was down there very shortly after Jim Boyd published an article in Railfan magazine called Something of the Bone Valley. So anyhow, using his magazine and having a few hours, I got the next few pictures. And these are Whitcomb 65 tonners, and they were at an operation that at that time was run by Mobile, as in Mobil Oil. Now we're at Port Sutton again. Again, this is pretty much off limits. I was there on business. I got a few photos. This locomotive is actually owned by IMC Agrico. This is IMC symbol. This is Agrico symbol. By this point, they had merged the two companies. And as I said, this is a port for shipping. And here we have an IMC Agrico 70 tonner. Now, Agrico, as I pointed out, had its own railroad. And I think that railroad still exists under a new owner, but the power didn't look very interesting. So Jim and I really didn't spend any time at all looking at it. They had a display in a place called Fort Meade, of all places, with this RS1 and a coach. They ran with a variety of locomotives. This one, the 1555, looks to me like it's a Paducah rebuilt Jeep. The ox yoke air filter here is characteristic. So these pictures are all taken, like I said, down in the Bone Valley. I was down there in 2001, and obviously I chased this train because the previous picture was of the same train, and this is just two different focal lengths at the same place. I'm not sure what's being crossed here, although if I had to guess, it would be CSX. They also had some switch engines. This to me looks like an SW1500. It's interesting that they put this cover over the vents to prevent anything from dropping in. Not all of their locomotives, switch locomotives, had that, as for example here. And here you can see the chemical plant back here where they convert the phosphate rock to phosphoric acid. Okay, we'll move east a little bit and take a look at what I believe is the only railroad in the United States that still carries sugarcane. Now, the cane fields are located in this general area. Okay? And this here, Sebring, even though it says Sebring, it's Sebring, was a CSX branch. And it ran down to Clewiston, which is right here. And you can barely make out Clewiston there. And when CSX decided to give it up, U.S. Sugar Corporation, which owns all the cane fields here, bought the branch and operated it as the South Central Florida Express. At some point, this line came down here and was a branch of the Florida East Coast. Florida East Coast sold everything in heavy black to U.S. Sugar Corporation. And I point this out for two reasons. One, because it's interesting history, but also because now U.S. Sugar runs these lines and as South Central Florida Express, but with their own power. And they run daily turns, at least during the week, from Clewiston here and from Clewiston here. And we're going to see both of those turns in a few minutes. This, I believe, may be another sugar cane factory that does not receive cane by rail. Two other things. The only remaining U.S. Sugar mill is in Clewiston. They used to have one in Bryant, but they closed it down. Okay, so let's go look at sugar. This is the, back when CSX ran this line, this is the local coming down from Sebring in Clewiston. And this is what replaced it. South Central Florida Express had their own paint scheme. And they kind of use the engines interchangeably because we have them here on a cane train. And one of the reasons that this looks all black is because they burn their fields before to remove the leaves before they harvest the sugar cane.
Do we import any sugar from Cuba anymore? You know?
I don't think so. We do import sugar, but I don't think we do from Cuba.
China.
And hang on a second. I want to change pages here on my notes. Okay. Yeah, so we're back we're still in 2001, and I'm not sure where we are, probably around Clewiston, and this looks like a sugar mill back here, although it looks awfully modern for that. Well, I don't know. I think this is the same mill right here. Now, in addition to seeing U.S. sugar power here, I want to point out that at least back in 2001, and even later than that, they still were using switchers around their plant. Today, this is the nose of one of their new six-axle locomotives. And six-axle locomotives are new to the property. They just showed up about 2 years ago, maybe even less than that. So now Sebring. Jim and I were down there and we saw two engines, light engines, heading north. And we thought they were going to get sugarcane. So we chased them. And unfortunately, we lost them when we took what we thought was a road that would keep us closer to the tracks. And it wound up to being a dead end. And we had to backtrack. But we went on up to Sebring, hoping we'd find it. And with a great deal of effort poking around Sebring, we did. And here's the Sebring turn, getting ready to head back to Clewiston.
What, Bob, what's the date of that last photo before this one? You know?
Yeah, I do. 4 weeks ago.
Oh, okay. Because I noticed it looked like those headlights had LEDs in them. So I was wondering.
Yes, they did. You're right. 4 weeks ago. It was taken on March 18th, Jim? 19th. 20th? I don't know. Somewhere's in around March 18th, 19th, or 20th. Okay, and this town is called Lake Placid. And for some reason, this is called Palmdale. And these are taken basically right off the road. We were chasing and not knowing what the hell we were doing. And here's another shot of some cane cars. And I wanted to show you this because this switcher is got auxiliary tanks up here, air tanks. And here we are at Bryant in 2001. And this mill is gone. And we're somewhere out in the cane fields around Clewiston. In 2001. And again at the Clewiston Mill. You can't get in here anymore. I went in here once with my wife. I went in here once with another guy. You can't get in close to the mills anymore. They'll be on you like white on rice. So these are all taken in Clewiston. This shows you what it looks like when they burn a field. And if you're careful and lucky, you can get all kinds of flame back in here. And the way they do this, after they harvest the cane, they put the cane in carts. And a tractor will pull 3 of these carts and bring them to a loader, which is what you see here. And then the loader will load the cane into to the cane railroad cars. And I thought one time I'd get a shot, an overhead shot. And so I went over, and I'll show you in the next picture. I went over and climbed up and went up this ramp right here to the top. And just as I got up there, there was this fluttering of wings, and an owl flew out from under from this shack. I don't remember if it was this particular one. And when I got up there and looked down, there were 3 or 4 eggs in the nest in the shack, and I just climbed down and said, "Not going to stay."
So they burn the stubble instead of using it for turning it under for fertilizer, huh?
They don't burn the stubble, they burn the leaves on the plants before they harvest the plants. And if you look here in the cars, you can see this looks brown and black, does not look green. And this was a place called Evan Kane Road outside Clewiston. And then we took a lot of shots at various times when I was down there in the fields, just to show what the area looked like. You can see the trains vary in length. This turns out to be a place that Jim and I photographed a few times. It's crossing the Miami Canal.
Henry Ford made that. No, Flagler.
And it's in, well, I'm not sure, Miami Canal, Lake Harbor or something like that. Now we're in Moorhaven.
Yeah, it's Lake Harbor, Bob.
Okay, thank you. And back here is Lake Okeechobee, and we have locks, or a dam here and locks here. And this is taken right off of a highway with a sidewalk. I mean, it's easy. And you can also shoot from here. There's a marina there. Now, on our last trip back in March, we drove into we drove down this road that was really not good. Okay, and we saw when we got down, and it's in a place called South Bay. Now, let me make sure that. Yeah, that it is South Bay, right, Jim? Or is it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's South Bay.
Yes, that's what I said. Okay.
Yeah.
And we found this guy. He was doing a little switching, and I had never seen a tank train on this railroad. As a matter of fact, I had never seen covered hoppers on this railroad, and there they were. And we got to talking to Zach, who you see here. And Zach told us that they were going to back into this siding, and they were going to have a meet with an inbound cane train. And after a while, here came the inbound cane train, and we had our meet.
What was in the tanks?
We have no idea.
Corn syrup? I mean,
LPG.
No. I mean, I don't know if they were empty or loaded,
Yeah.
you know.
We did see tanks on another train, this one here you show, that went into the factory or the mill. So I don't know what they would have been hauling in there.
Well, this is the same train, Jim, isn't it?
Yeah, he's picking up after he drops off whatever he had at another facility. He was pulling these out of that second facility.
Yep. Anyhow, and we saw another train the next day that actually held us up a little bit, had both tank cars and covered hoppers. And this is a train coming into Clewiston. There's a Y just behind us. He's coming from the north side of town. Next morning, we got up really early because we were hoping to photograph 6325 on either the outbound Sebring train or the inbound Fort Pierce turn. And I'm sitting in the car and I'm wondering, what the hell is Kleeman doing? He's out there, and I decide to go check on him, and he's taking pictures. And I mean, it's dark and he's taking pictures. And I said, if he can take pictures, I can too.
That's a pretty shot.
Thank you.
Overexposed.
And while we were there, they also started to move around some other power. Now, the 6323 will lead the train to Fort Pierce, and the 6325 will lead the train home. And the nose shot that you saw earlier is this area right here on this engine.
Is that a Southern business car over there on that track? Or you know?
It may well be. They now have a tourist operation where they take tourists out to the cane fields behind Steam. They have a former FEC 462. I think its number is 128, but I won't swear to that.
48.
148, thank you. And so they had passenger cars parked in this shop area.
No.
And then we went out to the Miami Canal and set up for this Fort Pierce turn, and waited and waited and waited and waited. And I decided to go for a broadside here because I wanted a decent picture, in case it was the only one I got, of the green unit.
That's the way to win.
Time well spent.
And then we chased this guy to Fort Pierce.
We would pay like that.
And
They're not in some lot.
this is, shoot. I think
It's
this
South
is,
Bay.
I was going to say South Bay. And this is outside Clewiston behind a junkyard. And we just happened to go explore a little bit, and there he was working. So we didn't get him again between there and Fort Pierce, and we hung out at the the connection between the FEC and the line down to Clewiston. And basically, it took so long for him to get out of there that I almost fell asleep. Maybe I did. And all of a sudden, the crossing gates started to sound off, the bells and all, and we just about got him. And the chase was on, and it was not a hard chase. There's a road that parallels the railroad, and it's really duck soup. And the next place was the Port Mayaca Canal Bridge. And he stops on the other side of the bridge near this signal. And this shack is where he can control the bridge from that side of the river. And the claxons will sound, and after a bit the bridge comes down and he will come across.
Was it a lift bridge? It's not a swing bridge, is it?
No, this is a lift bridge.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, lift bridge.
Looks old.
And here we are back at Miami Canal.
That's a pretty paint scheme.
Yeah, it is.
It's the
And
only
then
one.
coming into Evercane Road, south of Clewiston.
Or tank cars.
Yep. All right. So there are 3 associated railroads, north and south of Orlando. South of Orlando is the Florida Central. All 3 railroads are owned by Regional Rail. And Regional Rail is a shortline holding company. And some of you may know the East Penn up in Delaware and southeastern Pennsylvania. They also own that. And last year, Jim and I made an effort to photograph Florida Central because they are using a Seaboard Coast Line type paint scheme. And here we are at Eagle Lake in 2024. And this building here is an old jail.
Oh.
Now they also own, even though it says Florida Central on the engines move back and forth. They also own the Florida Midland. And this operation is based in Ocala. Unfortunately, the only thing they were going to do while we were there is switch the yard north of Ocala and then push some cars up to a scrap dealer. And 4603 is not a locomotive that really intrigued, and shooting engines, pushing cars is not something either of us really wanted to spend any time on. So we left.
So that black stripe is where the name was, I guess.
Yes, yes. And we went down to the Florida Midland. And they are based, now I need help, Jim. Where were they based? Do you remember?
It was in what, Modella Yard, I think.
No, that's where this picture's taken.
Yeah.
But they were north of there.
Oh, Apopka. The office was in Apopka, I think.
You are correct, Apopka.
Yeah.
And we got down, they told us that they were working in Modella Yard, and that at noon they'd have a job going on in the Starlight Industrial area. So we went down to Modella Yard, and unfortunately, by the time we got down there, this guy was working all the way up beyond where you could photograph him. This was the best I could do. Now, the reason it's Port Manatee is that Port Manatee that I talked about earlier has a switching operation, which you can't get in to see unless you're there on business. And this regional rail also owns that operation. Also at Modella Yard was this locomotive. We had photographed that a year ago on the Florida Central when we photographed the Seaboard Coast Line painted engines. Okay, now we're down on the Florida Midland. And after this guy sat for probably close to an hour, he finally switched a few cars, and we got him in an area that at least had some potential. And after he was done switching cars, he went somewheres, engine light, and when you're in the Orlando area, you're not going to follow him. So we gave up, and we went and headed south.
Now that's an old expression on that sign. Look out for the cars. Wow, that goes back to the 19th century.
Okay. And after we were done here, that's when we photographed the Floridian that I showed you earlier. The next morning, we had advanced information that the Seminole Gulf DeSoto turn was going to run from Arcadia, Florida to Fort Myers. And so we decided that was one of the principal objectives of our trip. We were going to be in Arcadia. Now, when we got there, they were still switching. And then they had some problems getting out of the yard, which was good because when we got there, this shot was completely shadowed.
Is that a tank car that's derailed in the forest?
No, that's a car that's in the yard. This is the interchange with CSX. I should have said that. Sorry. And this is the same spot, just a different focal length. So we chased him south. Let's see. And this is a place called Nocatee, Nocatee. And he had stopped to work at a place that was inaccessible. We could see him, but we couldn't get to him. At his next place, which was Fort Ogden, we could get it to them. And so we got a number of different angles here. See where I am. Oh, I'm sorry. That was the only shot. This is at Punta Gorda. And these pictures, Seminole Gulf, were all taken about a month ago.
Is that white along the side of the tracks? Is that sand, sandy soil, or what?
No, I think it's just white rock. It's not sand. Well, let me say this. This is sand. Is that what you're asking about? Or are you asking about this?
Well, yeah, they're well on the away from the track a little bit, and then out down there in that gully. So
That's sand. Yes, this is all sand. Okay?
yeah, yeah.
And then he worked up north of Punta Gorda a little bit. We had lunch while he was working and got down here just in time to get him leaving Punta Gorda. Okay. Whoops, sorry. All right. So the scenic highlight of this line is crossing. Oh, I didn't write down the name of the river. The Caloosahatchee River. And we waited and we waited and we waited on the other side, the upstream side of this bridge and causeway. And then he was obviously working up north of the causeway. We decided to go look for him. And we were just maybe quarter of a mile from the track, and I spotted him running south. And I said to Jim, he's leaving. And it was a scurry to get back here, especially since now the sun was on the downstream side of the track. But here he is, 3 views of him crossing the Caloosahatchee, whatever, river. And this is just north of Fort Myers. I'm sorry, what happened to the other view? I don't know. There was another view. Okay, and then here he is coming into Fort Myers. And this was actually the last shot of the trip. The Seminole Gulf runs a mystery dinner train, leaves about 6:30 in the evening, and we were able to get our final shots on the cane train with the green engine and still get over here in time to get this shot of the train leaving the station in Fort Myers. And the power is down here. This is just a cab car that they got from the Long Island.
Bob, I've ridden that dinner train with my wife, and it's a really good meal. They serve an excellent dinner, and they have a play that goes on at the same time, and the play moves up and down the train from one car to another. So it's really quite entertaining.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Okay. Also in the realm of passengers is a very new operation called Sunrail. And this photo was taken at Meadowwoods of people getting on and off the train. And this lady here is a Sunrail employee who is assigned to the station. And she wasn't happy when we did some things down here, but you know, whatever. And the power for these trains are motive power industry locomotives. And this, I believe, is Meadow Woods again. Oh, and the trackage is CSX. You know, this one in particular, she wasn't happy because I went around the railing and got down a little lower. And finally, this is a place called, maybe it's not finally, we'll see, called Taft. Yes, it is finally.
Yep. No Taft.
The granddaddy of commuter operations down there is Tri-Rail. And I had an aunt who lived in 20th Century Village, which is in Deerfield Beach. And I was by this time handling her affairs for her. And so I would go down about every 3 months. And I took a camera this time, and it's 2012. And I just went over to the station before I had my dinner, because she didn't come out with me for dinner, and got some pictures of Tri-Rail. Okay. I believe this may be Boca Raton, and this picture was taken in 2017, I believe, yes. Obviously the same train, different focal lengths. And here we are at the end of the line in Mangonia Park, which is north of West Palm. And this engine, the engines in this class were built by Brookfield Locomotive Works. And now we're at, well, it says where we are, West Palm Beach. And this is also a CSX or Amtrak stop. And this is also CSX trackage. Actually, I'm going to take that back. At this point, I think it's owned by Tri-Rail. And they have what I think are really interesting cab cars instead of just the flat end of a coach. Back at West Palm.
That station goes back a ways, doesn't it?
Yep. And this picture was probably taken in 2024 based on the paint scheme I see on this locomotive. And you'll see more of that in a minute or two. Meanwhile, this was the paint scheme that replaced the original. And this is at the Fort Lauderdale Airport, I think.
Why is it called Tri-Rail?
I would have been able to tell you that at one time, unless it's because it connected West Palm with Fort Lauderdale and Miami. Anyhow, this picture was taken in 2024, and it's their most recent paint scheme. And let me go back for a minute. I want to see something. Okay. And I was up at the end of the platform because I knew a train was coming south, and I just happened to get this pass there. And here's one of the new engines in the paint scheme. Okay, moving forward to the most modern of passenger operations, Brightline. Now, in 2017, Brightline was rumored to be running tests with their equipment. And Jim and I had hoped that we would be down there and that we would be able to see them run some of their test trains. It was not to be. So we went to their maintenance facility, and we were kind of just waiting, not taking pictures, just waiting, right? And some guy came along and chased us away. And so we backed off about 30, 40 feet and stood around waiting, and another guy came off, and we thought he was going to chase us away, but he came up to us and he said, "What you guys doing?" And we told him we were hoping that they would run, and we could get some pictures of them out on the line. So we said, well, I'm sorry, but we're not going to run today. Would you like to come in and take a look and maybe take some pictures? And we said, oh, no, we don't want to do that. And so this was one of the pictures we got. Turned out the guy that invited us in was, at that time at least, chief mechanical officer for Brightline.
Wow.
In 2018, my wife went down and I went to Florida because we were taking a cruise. We usually went a day or two early. And by that time they were running, and I prevailed upon her to let me get at least one picture, which I got two. I think one coming and one going.
Are those grates on the side
Yes,
to cool the engine instead of on the roof like you see on freight locomotives?
I think so. And I would remind you that the tunnel motors also had grates on the side, as did early GEs, I think. But anyhow, these are Siemens locomotives and Siemens cars. And I think they're basically the same equipment that Canada bought. So anyhow, this is 2018. And then in 2024, Jim and I made an effort to really get Brightline. And we shot all over the place, but I'm going to show you the pictures geographically starting in West Palm Beach. And this is taken from a parking structure. And the station is right there. Here's a southbound in the station boarding passengers. So this is Jupiter, northbound train. It had been raining on and off. We got up on the bridge, the highway bridge, which is just off to the left here, and we got rained on. So we went down and stood under trees, and it cleared a little bit. We started back up and we got rained on again.
No lightning, I hope.
No lightning. So we went back under the trees and it cleared off a little bit. And I said, I'm not doing this again. So Jim went up on the bridge alone. He got the shot. This is what I got of a northbound train. By the way, this is Florida East Coast trackage down here. And this is what the southbounds look like from the bridge. Further north, on the north side of Stewart, here is a southbound train. And here, I believe, in Fort Myers, northbound. Yes, Fort Myers, northbound. And the connection track is, I think, around the corner here to U.S. Sugar. And here's a southbound train in Fort Myers.
It's Fort Pierce.
Fort Pierce, I'm sorry. Fort Pierce, thanks, Jim.
Myers and West.
I got this down as Vero Beach. And this line has a lot of bridges on it. And here is the one at Roosevelt. And then Palm Bay. And later on, you'll see an FEC shot taken up this little inlet here. And here we are in Melbourne. Southbound train. And a northbound train. And what's interesting about this building here is it has a parking garage. And you don't have to pay to get in there. And you'll see why that's interesting when we get into FEC. Okay. something that I thought was really, really neat. Tampa has a retro trolley operation. Runs from Ybor City in the east, which is where these pictures were taken, down towards the center of Tampa. And these are not historic vehicles. They are built recently to the old plans. Recreations. So here are a couple of pictures of this streetcar operation in Ybor City. And you can see how it's spelled right here, Y-B-O-R. All right. Last but not least on our list is Florida East Coast. We're back to Fort Lauderdale in 1973. Unfortunately, back in those days, I was quite cost conscious, and this is from an Agfa chrome slide, as are the next few. Northbound train, crossing the river there right off. There's a place here called Riverfront Park. And in 1970, well, I think it was 1975, but it might be later than that. In New Smyrna, I'm sorry, this is Fort Lauderdale again. Sorry about that.
Well, there was a Kodak film that kind of emphasized the blues too, wasn't there?
Ektachrome.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, and then in 1977, New Smyrna Beach. And that's where their shops were. I don't know if they still are, but that's where they were, and they have the 413 on a transfer table. Okay, courtesy of Mr. Kleeman. And this is the northbound shot at Jupiter in the sun. And these are SD70 M2s, or at least the lead engine is. The trailing engine, I think, is an SD40 that they got from Union Pacific. And this is very similar to or identical to the Alaska paint scheme that they got on their SD70 Max. And here we are in Jupiter. Southbound train.
That's Stewart, Bob.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. That's Stewart. And then the next two shots are also in Stewart. Northbound train. And this is a paint scheme that came on the second group of 4 units. They got 8. And this paint scheme is because the railroad was part of Rail America at the time. Yeah, Rail America. That's what I read. And then this is looking into the town of Stewart. That's northbound, isn't it, Jim?
Correct.
All right. Okay. So in 2000, and then the last two pictures were 2008. And sometime around 2015, 2016, the railroad bought a fleet of General Electric locomotives. I forget the designation, but they have 4 powered axles and 2 idlers. And they came in a new paint scheme, but the paint scheme for locals, which is what you see here, and they were mostly Jeep 40s. There's a place called Bayard remained this blue with white lettering. But the new locomotives were really pretty. And this was dubbed the Champion paint scheme because the Champions that they ran in conjunction with Atlantic Coast Line had this paint scheme. And what makes these engines unique is they had tenders that carried liquefied natural gas. I think it was liquefied, but they did carry natural gas. And the engines ran on a mixture of 20% natural gas and 80% diesel oil. And this is taken at St. Augustine.
How is natural gas mixed with diesel oil?
Well, the diesel oil is atomized. So it's just a very fine mist of diesel oil in the gas.
Okay.
Right? And then they pump in oxygen, and the heat of compression in the diesel engine causes the gas to burn. The gas oil mixture, diesel oil mixture to burn. So here we have a southbound at St. Augustine. And again, and again. Back to Melbourne. And a northbound train in the morning. As you can see, there's a walkway along the river here. Gives you a lot of different angles. There's also a road bridge across the canal, across the river here. Another northbound. And still another northbound. And if you went up in the garage that I mentioned, you got this view of a southbound. The previous pictures were all taken from this walkway here. Moving south, we have a couple of shots at Palm Bay. No, I'm sure. Sorry, this is Melbourne again, but with a different river, as is this. Now we're northbound at Palm Bay. And from the upstream side of the bridge, where I told you we would get one, another northbound at Palm Bay. And here we are at Roseland. And a stone train at Fort Pierce. And you remember the big bridge in the background of some of the pictures at Stewart? This is what it looks like if you get up on that bridge. But you can also shoot northbound. Well, you can't do this anymore. The state blocked it off. But this is a northbound from the north side of the river there. And a southbound in the evening, late afternoon. These are all at Stewart. And here's a northbound. This again is a shot you can't do anymore. And note the lift bridge here, not lift, the drawbridge here. I don't know that it still functions, but it's there. Well, you know what? It's got to function because there's some big marinas on this side of that bridge.
Yeah, it still functions. And the FEC is investigating whether or not, one, they double track this area, and two, somehow gain some elevation so that they don't have to lift the bridge for boat traffic as often as they need to now.
Thank you. And here we are back in West Palm. This is actually the Brightline facility out back here, and this is where we got kicked out of. And this is a ballast train. And a southbound freight from the same location. Jim and I went back here to maybe get some pictures last year, and we decided the local inhabitants that we found under the bridge made it a wise decision not to stay. Okay, back in Fort Lauderdale, this area has grown up. And this picture was taken from a parking garage. Moving south, we had heard that that there were sometimes Champion painted SD40s working the port job in the port of Miami. So we hung out there for a while and actually caught this guy doing that, as well as one of the former UPSD40s still in the old paint. And finally, Florida East Coast was sold a few years ago to Grupo Mexico. Grupo Mexico decided they wanted their own identity. This is the new Florida East Coast paint scheme taken last year in West Palm. Jim and I spent time the afternoon of March 16th and this year trying to get a couple of trains. We only got one in St. Augustine. The good news is we got the train with the new paint scheme. And so I thank you for your attention.
Hey.
Bravo.
Bob. Very nice.
Very good, very good.
Good job.
Great program.
Thank you.